Good afternoon. I'm Jamie Webb. I'm the assistant planner for the city of Easthampton. I'd like to thank you all for coming out this afternoon. I'm here with the city planning director, Jeff Bagg, Ted Harvey, our consultant from Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and staff engineer, Diane Rossini, and DPW director, Greg Nuttleman. The purpose of this afternoon's hearing is to have a presentation discussion regarding the implementation of the 2019 Community Development Block Grant and the proposed reprogramming of the excess CDBG funds from the initial construction work on Maple Street. For the purposes of the grant, we actually have to have this in the format of two back-to-back hearings tonight. So the second hearing will begin at 4:15, and that's going to be the one that talks primarily about the rapid flashing beacons. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about the 2019 grant and its work on Maple Street, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ted and Jeff and Diane. I'm just going to share my screen. I have a short, what would have been a handout, but for COVID. And so this has some information as well about the Maple Street improvements. To provide a little bit of background, Community Development Block Grant is a federally funded program that passes money through the Massachusetts Department of Housing and Community Development. And the funds can only be used for projects that primarily benefit low and moderate income individuals and families. The city does not automatically receive these funds every year. We have to apply to DHCD for a competitive grant program in order to receive the funds. So in 2019, we applied for and received a little bit less than $552,000 to fund the construction of the Phase 3 Admiral Street Neighborhood Improvement Program, which primarily consisted of work along Maple Street. That project is now substantially complete. We have a few punch list items that are being completed, and that project was to replace the sewer lines, improve the drainage on the street, underground, repaving, replacement of sidewalks where there were already sidewalks, and removing resetting curbing. So I'm going to turn over to Ted now, can talk a little bit more about some of the specifics of that program.
Good afternoon, everybody. I don't have too much to add to this. Greg and or Diane might have more technical stuff. I just wanted to point out that, as Jamie said, this is an ongoing neighborhood project, labeled the Admiral Street neighborhood, that's been going on for a few years. For those of you who live in that area, I'm sure you're well aware of it. And this is, we've had to break it out because there is limited funding every year. So this was our Phase 3. As Jamie said, it's pretty much complete. And there's one final phase on Charles Street. We'll be moving on to that next. But the other thing I wanted to point out, that this is, there's two public hearings required for the CDBG grants. The initial one, which happens when we start looking at applying for funds. So that already happened quite some time ago. And this is the second one. It's the performance hearing. And it's just to discuss the project. Sometimes they're more complex because there's other projects, but for this one, it's a pretty straightforward project. So that's, if there's any other technical issues or regarding the actual project itself, then we'll just wait for questions, but I'm not going to dive too far into it.
So thank you, Ted. So are there any when President had any questions or concerns or issues that came up regarding the Maple Street project. Now, I'd be happy to answer those questions or talk about the project in more detail. Okay. Hearing no questions or comments.
Hi, I had a quick question.
Yes.
Hi, my name's Carrie Haig. I'm a resident on Mount Tom Avenue. And are we talking about the proposed lights that are going to be put on at the crosswalks?
Yes, that's going to be the subject of the next hearing that will begin at 4:15.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do actually, that's a good question. But it reminds me that the important part also is that this was, we came in under budget, so we'll be able to, that's what where we have the extra money. So that's always nice when we come in under budget with the project. But that will lead to our 4:15 public hearing about reprogramming those funds. So 4 minutes, hold tight.
Okay. And while we're waiting, I'm going to just pull up that flyer again, the summary, and just point out that the construction funds, you can see under the revised program budget, we had the total grant award was for a little bit less than $552,000. The subtotal for construction with the engineering and program delivery and some other miscellaneous reimbursements came to $452,000. We have some more money left aside for administration of the grant, and it leaves us with about $37,000, a little bit more than $37,000 that are excess, and that, again, we'll be talking about how to reprogram them at the 4:15 meeting. If there's any other questions, comments, concerns?
I would pop in and just thank everyone who worked so hard on this. It was, I'm a resident of Clark, so I saw all of it go down, and you guys did a great job. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I'm going to go ahead and close the first public hearing, the performance hearing. I guess that's all we have to do is say we're closing it. And then I'm going to, if we just hold tight for another 2 minutes, we'll start the reprogramming meeting in 2 more minutes.
Jamie, do you think within that 2 minutes, just to keep, because for anyone who might watch this later as well, would you be comfortable just saying something quick about the last stage of the project for Charles Street, and just give a thumbnail sketch of that in the next minute?
Sure.
Okay.
So we applied for last year. We applied for construction funds to complete the Admiral. To complete the Admiral Street improvement projects with construction of the sewer and drainage improvements on Charles Street. We received those funds and we just signed a contract with the state about a week ago. We just got the confirmation back that they signed it on their end. So we're expecting to do some contracting and then go out to bid for the construction related activities on Charles Street, hopefully early late spring or early summer. There's also, in addition to that, we're doing a planning study in the new city neighborhood to look at the environmental conditions, the street conditions, sidewalks, sewer, water, drainage, to come up with a a comprehensive plan for improvements that we can do in that neighborhood. There's also a continuation of the housing rehab program and aging in place as a new program for aging in place for small grants to make livability upgrades to people's houses so they continue to be able to live in their house as they grow older, and things like railings or tub modifications. That way someone who has limited mobility can still live in their house. So those will all be getting started soon. And now we're a little bit past 4:15. So at this point, we can open up the hearing for the reprogramming of the excess FY 2019 Community Development Block Grant funds. And I'm going to turn it over to Jeff.
Thanks, Jamie. I'm Jeff Bagum, the city planner. I'm here, this is kind of restarting the hearing discussion for this portion. So we have a team here with us. Greg Nuttleman is the DPW director. We have Diane Rossini, staff engineer, Jamie Webb, who's our assistant planner, and Ted Harvey, who's our consultant team with Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. So, what Jamie previewed before at the beginning of the meeting was that the earlier project came in under budget, and there's this excess money. It's approximately $37,000 that in order to use it for a different purpose, we have to conduct this public hearing and seek the permission from DHCD for the use of the funds. And over the past couple months, what the planning department and DPW have been looking at is the idea of installing pedestrian safety improvements on Clark Street. Because we're using the community development block grant funds, we do have requirements. So with this fund, it has to be within the study area that we were already working in, and the emphasis is on a thing, something that can be installed and done quickly. And so that does exclude things that are outside of the study area, and excludes design work, because what they really want to fund is not design necessarily, but just actual infrastructure improvements. And so going back to 2018 and 2019, there was a series of meetings and community input on expressing concerns about the speed of vehicle travel on Clark Street and pedestrian safety. And when the funds became available as excess, this was sort of the first project that kind of came to mind as something that we could do kind of quickly, and hopefully in support of increasing pedestrian safety in that area. So I do have an image. I have 3 slides I'm going to put up just to quick demonstrate the area that we're talking about. So there are 2 intersections. There's 2 crosswalks on Clark Street, one at North and South Hampshire, and the other at Admiral Street. And as part of the block grant project, the past block grant project, these crosswalks were put in, and then they have kind of the standard pedestrian crossing sign. And the proposal, on the surface, it's just quite simple. But what we're trying to do is we want to install what are called rectangular rapid flashing beacons. And so they are push button activated signs that will flash when a pedestrian wants to cross the crosswalk, and it's intended to alert drivers that there's a pedestrian, doing this. We have now a series of these that we've installed throughout Easthampton. Our first set was actually on Cottage Street, and that was done through, a Mass DOT Complete Streets project. And then we've had the opportunity through other funding sources to include them on Williston Ave, on Pleasant Street, on Ferry Street, and Route 10. So this is an opportunity to try to use this funding to install these at the 2 intersections, the 2 crosswalks on Clark Street. We're trying to be responsive. So, there's some public input. There's some members of the public here today, but we also gotten letters of support for the project, which is great. And I think one of the things that we're aware of is that there's other concerns and there's other issues, especially with how fast cars are driving on Clark Street. but we don't have enough money in this with this pot to solve those problems, but we wanted to offer something to that neighborhood. And I think combined with this, there's a commitment from DPW to paint what are called fog lines on each side of Clark Street, which is a measure that would help slow vehicle traffic. And then we have communicated with the police department, and they're willing to put a cruiser out there more often and install the radar signs that they can mount to existing signs, which tells you as a driver your speed. And right before the meeting, I actually got a message that I actually think they went up somewhere on Clark Street today. I didn't get out there, but I think that they already are in place. And so this combination of efforts is really intended to be responsive to try to start to address the concerns that have been raised. And so again, we are holding this public hearing to understand if there are any questions or issues, or obviously support would be desirable too, so that we can seek the funding approval from the state. We still need to get proposals from contractors, and then try to have the work done before June 30th would be our target. So I think with that, I'll pause. And Jamie, I don't know how you want to shift around, if there's questions or other information that I might have missed.
Maybe if there's anything Ted wants to add about the requirements or anything that we might have missed. But I'll just, before you do that, we're looking at about $37,000 of excess funds. Each of these beacons, as I was showing on the screen previously, I'll bring it up again. So each of these beacons costs about $10,000 to $14,000 to purchase and install. So we're looking at $28,000 for just the installation. The mobilization is a lump sum we carry to sort of get the contractor and their equipment and everything that they need to do the work out to the site. And potentially, if the bids come in low, there'll be a little bit of extra funds, which would be used to reimburse DPW for the cost of the fog lines between Franklin Street and Charles Street, which is in the study area. The rest of Clark Street will still be painted with those fog lines, but we can't reimburse DPW for the fog lights outside of that area. So they're going to be doing that with separate DPW funds. And so that brings us close to about the cost of $37,500 was close to what we have remaining. If at the end of this project, our budgets are higher than what the actual cost ended up being, we'll use the excess funds. We're planning to use the excess funds to support the housing rehab program and the aging in place program that were funded by the 2020 block grant program. So Ted, if you want to add anything, or we can open up for
You guys did a good job. Questions?
Okay, so stop sharing the screen, and then if there's anyone has any comments, questions, concerns, support, that would be great to let us know. Thank you.
I'll go first. Whoops, maybe not.
No, you can go.
Oh, okay. I introduced myself before, Carrie Haig. I'm a resident on Mount Tom Ave. I've been here for almost 17 years, and the house has been in my family for a long time, since the house was built, almost 100 years ago. So years ago, my brother was actually hit by a car on South Hampshire and Clark Street. He did survive, but it was due to excess speed. And I walk all around Clark and Maple and Mount Tom, and I've crossed the new crosswalks, which is great to have those big, huge signs, but people don't stop. So I think having these beacons that light up will be beneficial. I mean, there's sometimes I'm ready to cross the street and the cars just whiz right by me. I'm just like, really? But I also was wondering, are they considering, or are you considering putting one down on Laura Ave in Clark, where it's near the Sunrise Sun Home, the elderly housing?
We had not necessarily considered that. So the constraints that we have are that for this funding source, and that's how a lot of the projects take shape, is if there's a need, and there's a lot of need across town. I think when we engage on social media, it's clear that there's other areas, but our constraint that is really important at this point is that we have to be within the same study areas that we were for the other projects. So I think that was why we focus on those two crossings first. So I think at this point and I think the budget's going to be tight. I did want to say something to add what Jamie said is if we get estimates that come in over that, we do have some limited funds available through the planning department office that's related to block grant that we would add on to make sure that we can make this project happen. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we don't have enough to expand it outward at this time. Okay. So I think it's a legitimate question that we've heard other areas too, but for this purpose, we're focused on those two.
That's great. Well, I think it'd be very beneficial. So thank you.
So Jamie, there's two other people with hands up, Keisha and then I see Matt Doobie. I don't know who's running this. I guess, Keisha, do you want to speak?
Before Keisha.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Keisha Zulo. I've been in Easthampton for well over a decade. And so when this project came up, I thought, it's great that we have the crosswalk, but my conversation that I brought up is having speed bumps, because I live on a corner where there was an accident that flipped over into my neighbor's yard. And I feel like the speed, it hasn't changed. And I don't know if the flashing lights will do enough to change it. And so so that's my thought on it. And also just being a resident on this street, it feels more commercial to have those flashing lights than it does residential. The other areas where those flashing lights are makes complete sense. But for me, aesthetically, on where they're planning on putting it, it does not, to me, feel residential and kind of devalues what I like about my street. And so the other thing I wanted to know was if there is a penalty to not use that money, and can it be redirected to temporary speed bumps or something that will actually slow the traffic down on Clark Street? Because it's not just there are trucks that come through there, it's diverted traffic that comes off the mountain, comes up Clark Street. So I'm late to the party as far as the planning goes. I understand that. But if there's an option to have the funds diverted to use speed bumps on Clark, I think it's better than the flashing lights.
Thank you, Keisha. So we have been discussing this for a long time, as I'm sure you have been as well. And I think I would like to respond to what you have to say a little bit out of order. If we don't use these funds, we have to give them back to the state. So we are restricted to these improvements that are in the study area of the last where we've done the Admiral Street neighborhood improvements, or we can use these funds to fund like housing rehab, to continue the housing rehab program, and things like that. The speed bump issue is more of a DPW issue, so I can't really speak to that, but fortunately we do have our DPW director here, and I think there might be some information that he can provide that would explain why we're looking at this set of responses to slow down traffic. So, Greg, do you have some?
Yeah, I think what we're trying to do here is some incremental improvements to that I think each will have a positive effect on slowing traffic and making it safer for pedestrians. I mean, one thing to consider with speed humps is if they're installed near your home, you're gonna deal with constant noise of acceleration and deceleration of vehicles, and then the noise associated with the vehicles hitting the speed humps. So I'm really interested to see what the fog lines with the narrowing of the lanes and the rectangular rapid flashing beacons, what that's able to do, that coupled with the increased police presence on Clark Street, what that's able to do for making it safer for the area before we put in speed humps, which will help with speed more than likely, but will also possibly create other issues.
And Keisha, I wanted to, if that's okay, I wanted to try to respond too, because I want to build on what Greg's saying. Is I think one of the issues is that the speed hump discussion takes additional consideration. It takes some additional thought and planning and design work. That's where we're kind of stuck. Whether we can try to install the beacons, and I think the acknowledgement is that it by itself will not slow vehicle traffic, but it's going to enhance pedestrian safety. So I just want to be clear that I think we understand that this improvement is for pedestrian safety, and I think we need to take an incremental look at how to slow vehicle traffic. I think there's, in the letters that came through like a year ago, there's questions about the effectiveness of speed humps, and I think we haven't even gotten real clarity on whether we would be talking about temporary speed humps or permanent ones. But I think there's a lot of considerations that one of the rationales is that we don't want to miss this opportunity to install the pedestrian safety improvements. But I think what we want to express is a commitment to continue to look at a longer term solution to car travel speed. But I think maybe we hear from a couple other people and then we circle back. I know that we didn't answer your question, Keisha, because I think it was like you want us to do speed humps, and I think we want to get clarity on whether there's enough support to do the beacons at this point. Because if we don't, we don't have enough time to reprogram it and do design and do those other sort of more in-depth analysis. So that would have to come later. So maybe we can shift around a little bit and circle back to that, Keisha. I know that we didn't just say yes to you, so we have to hear the other input, and then maybe we'll make sure you feel heard and understand that there would be more incremental steps we would be considering.
I also want to add that because we're using the state's federal money for the rectangular rapid flashing beacons, and we had previously used the state and federal money of the same grant program to redo the street. There is actually a limitation. They won't let us use their funds again to dig up the street for a 5 or 10 year period of time. And so these rapid flashing beacons can be installed in a way that they add to the project, whereas otherwise we have to dig up and replace street and sidewalk and curbing and things like that has already been paid for by the state. So there's a higher likelihood that the state will deny our request when we come back to them to put in the speed humps, whereas they would be more likely to approve our request with this less invasive intervention. So that is another consideration for why we're looking at this thing. But I think that helps to respond, or we can discuss it further.
So I think Matt Doobie was next, then maybe Chris Korchek and Katie I see other hands up. So maybe we'll keep going and then we'll keep talking. That's the nature of the hearing, so that's fine.
Thanks, Jeff and Jamie, and hello, friends and neighbors. I live on Clark Street and just wanted to add my voice to supporting this. And we appreciate you guys thinking about us. Anything to improve the safety and the walkability, bikeability of our street and our neighborhood is certainly welcome. We have so many residents on that street who are elderly, and I see them walking their pets all the time, and I definitely fear for them crossing over. People going to the Easthampton Community Center, where you can't really walk down that side of the street. You have to cross over and then cross back. So this would be certainly welcome, and I know that we're definitely, as a group, of neighbors, willing to help in any way we can, whether that's fundraising to fund some of these future measures, what have you. But it's somewhat heartbreaking to see, families biking on the sidewalk down our street because it is so narrow and so dangerous. So anything you guys can do to assist is much appreciated. So thank you.
Well, that's a tough act to follow, but I will say yes to everything that Matt said. Fully agree with that. My name is Chris. I'm on Clark. And I'm at one of the corners that the beacons will be installed at. And I do see people waiting all the time to cross. And I have actually seen people speed up. And that's when they're seen. Most of the time, I think people are just not seen there. So the beacons will definitely improve that safety there. So I just wanted to speak in favor of that. And thank you, everyone.
Great, thank you. Then maybe Katie, Lindsay, and then those are the hands that are up now. Sorry, you're muted, Katie. Sorry.
Thank you. Katie Carr. I live on Mutter Street. I regularly cross Clark Street for walking and running, and I wanted to express my support for putting in the flashing beacons and my appreciation for the crosswalks that were painted there. I've definitely noticed it's a lot easier to cross that street now. Cars are more likely to stop than they were before. They're still not super likely. So there's definitely room for improvement there. I was also curious if there are plans to improve the crossing of Clark Street where it meets Holyoke Street. That's definitely a crosswalk I use a lot. It's incredibly dangerous. Cars turning off of Cottage and off of Holyoke Street often don't stop, don't see me, or maybe do see me and don't stop. Not entirely sure. I think probably both. I've been almost hit there. I've been in Easthampton for 10 years, and the entire time I've been there, it's been a dangerous place to cross. Even I was really disappointed that the improvements that were made at that intersection didn't really seem to improve that crossing, just the one across Cottage Street. Since it's been improved, there's definitely been times I've almost been hit there. There's also the problem of people rolling through the crosswalk to make a stop when they're coming from Clark Street to turn onto either Cottage or Mountain Road. And I know Annette sees that all the time because she's there regularly. I'm sure Annette doesn't need a last name, right? You all know who I'm talking about. So yeah, I had that question about if there are plans to improve it, what can be done, what I can do as a resident to help make that happen. Thanks.
Since it's a relatively small group here, I mean, I'll try to respond, and I would defer to Greg. I think I do want to acknowledge that when some of the concerns were initially raised in 2019, the Public Safety Subcommittee and the Board of Public Works, they called for a comprehensive kind of look at pedestrian safety throughout town. And, I think we would acknowledge that that has not happened. But I think one of the questions that we're looking at here is, because that has not happened yet, do we not take advantage of an opportunity now to install these pedestrian safety improvements? So that's something that kind of nags at me a little bit, but I think that's what we're talking about here. Katie, I think your question about the other crosswalk, I mean, that to my knowledge, there's no plan for that at the moment. How exactly to initiate that is not clear. One of the key things that I've said, and it's important, it sounds odd, but it's important, is that if there's not funding available, then it's hard to move a project up through to a process. So that's one of the key things, that if we can explore funding for improvements across town or other locations, then that's going to be really the driver to allow it to move forward. So I think I heard fundraising. I think that's great. I think at the moment for this discussion, this public hearing, we are constrained to the two that we're talking about. But I think, there's some city councilors on the line. We have a team here who's hearing all this, so it's not going unheard. It's just coming up with a plan or a process. And Greg, I don't know if you want to add to any of that.
Well, as you said, Jeff, it's not something we're looking at right now, but it's something we will look at. I appreciate the comments, and I will see if our city engineering staff can look at that particular crosswalk and see what, if anything, we can do there in the short term to make it a safer crossing.
Thanks. So I think it was Lindsay, then Tom Peak, and then Pat Brock.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Rothschild. I live at 173 Mount Tom Ave. I'm also a city councilor, but I'm going to speak first as just a resident. I support the flashing lights. I have a son who lives on the side of Clark, and as he grows older and becomes more independent, he's cutting that way by himself. And it's scary. I'm a neighbor of Carrie, who spoke earlier about her brother being hit at that intersection. We were always very cognizant of that. He crosses at both those crossings because he has a home at both places. And I've also felt that crossing over, cars don't stop. They don't see you, they speed up. So that would make me feel more comfortable as a parent, having my child crossing there by himself. I also agree with what others have said, Keisha and Katie. I know we're here to talk about the flashing lights, but it's also a good opportunity to re-emphasize the need for slowing down methods. At that end of Clark, I feel that people turn onto Clark from Holyoke Street, and there was a rollover right there from someone turning too fast within the last year and a half. And that Katie was talking about that crosswalk, that is very dangerous. I think we really need traffic calming right as people enter onto Clark, because what happens is people turn and then they speed up like a runway. So by the time they get down to our crosswalk, they're already flying. If we could slow them down by the community center, by the top of it, that would be good. So I am a city councilor, so I see my fellow city councilors on here too. So I think I just, I'm committing to staying on this topic. I'm also on the public safety committee, and I ask that those of you that are here to talk about it to keep showing up as well, because that's really how things get done. The constant, that's why Jeff thought of us, because we needle him. So thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay. So I think Tom, you would be next.
Hi, everyone. Tom Peak, 55 Holyoke Street. So I'm the Precinct 3 City Councilor, which includes Clark Street. One thing about Precinct 3 that I think it might be lost on some of the folks who live in some of the more outlying parts of Easthampton is the amount of foot traffic that goes on. The amount of, particularly having an incredible sort of cultural district like Cottage Street within walking distance of your house. If I'm going to go down to grab something to eat or get a beer at one of the bars or whatever, I am usually doing so on foot, unless the weather's terrible, because it just makes more sense that I'd spend as much time looking for parking. And one of the things that means is that I am frequently coming home on foot late when it's dark out. Not anymore, because we're all, sort of shut down for a while, but hopefully very soon, that'll be over and I'll go back to that. And, one of the things that I've always really spoken for getting as many of these rapidly flashing beacons as we can. It's not a magic bullet. It won't fix all of the problems, but what it will mean is that when people are trying to cross the street, when it's laid out, and when there's people speeding and maybe not paying as much attention as they should, that it'll be very hard to miss that people are crossing the street. That one of the first things that I dealt with, or not personally, but one of the first things that happened when I became a city councilor in the first year was we had a traffic fatality at a crosswalk in the precinct. And, as a response to that, some of these were put up. I think that was probably in a big part that might've been the plan already, but I do think, I just think these are a cool idea. I think that having a way to really get people's attention, that someone's stepping out into the crosswalk, particularly if their view is in any way obscured. I mean, I know that on Clark Street, sometimes people do park on the side of the street, when there's big events or things at the church and whatnot. And I don't think that goes up that far, but I've seen situations where it's, if it's a kid or if it's dark out, you might not see someone when they're crossing the street. And when you have a street that's very, very straight like that, and relatively wide, it's sort of, a lot of people feel really safe and comfortable going down that fast. So I think that if we have a little bit of money that we can divert to just putting things like that up to sort of draw people's attention to the fact that there is, you know, a human being coming into the crosswalk, that's a good, you know, first step. And of course, you know, on Clark Street and all over the area, I think, you know, there's lots of opportunities for more pedestrian safety work. And those are conversations that absolutely should continue. But if we've got a little project like this that isn't going to need a lot of design work, we already have the money for it. You know, my inclination is we should go for it and then, you know, keep talking. So I have to actually jump back onto a work meeting, but I just wanted to come in to say that. So thanks so much for everyone's time. And I really hope this goes through. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Tom. So then I think, Pat, you had your hand up, and we'll circle back to ask if anyone else has any other comments or questions, but I think that's everyone who has their hand up.
So can you hear me? Yes. Okay. I got a new camera, so I don't know if anybody can hear that, so I wanted to make sure. I wanted to just say I support the blinking lights as well. I live on Briggs Street, but I travel a ton on Clark Street, and it's during the day and during the night. And when it is dark, it is kind of hard to see sometimes, even though the lighting. I'm actually trying to think now about the lighting that's near those crosswalks, and I can't remember if it's great or not, which makes me believe even if it's great, it's still dark. And having those flashing beacons, I think, is a great idea. I know that folks go fast up and down that street, and I probably have as well. I know that I did notice that the police did put that radar sign check thing that they move around the city. So hopefully that helps. I know it helps a little bit when it's there, but that's at least a good piece to help kind of slow things down. But again, I just wanted to give my support for having those there, because again, I do travel that road a lot. I do walk that road a lot, and having those blinking lights, I think, is a great incentive. So that's my support. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. So Jamie, I don't know what else we want to do. I just want to say one more thing, in response to Ms. Zullo's comment about, we're trying to address it, and I'm in some ways I know that it's not enough, especially for the travel, like how fast cars are traveling. But I feel like we're trying, and the beacons will, if we're successful, they'll go up. We've already through this conversation, it's been about a month, and kind of running around like a chicken with my head cut off to even make this part work. But so if the radar signs are up and if the fog lines get painted, I just hope that you will feel some level of people are trying to. I think Tom Peake said it, but I think there's no one solution that's going to solve it. So if we start to piece them all together, that would be where we would win. The only thing that the commercial feel. I'm sensitive to what you said. I don't want to not address that. I think Clark Street is kind of unique. It's one of those streets that's kind of in between. But I think what we're realizing is that it's a heavily traveled road. So we might have to compromise a little bit of that feel by installing the beacons to enhance the pedestrian safety there. It wouldn't be necessary on a lot of other streets because it's just not as many vehicles going up and down. So we're in that, it's kind of that crossover street that I think this is one of the pieces of the puzzle that we would have to put together to try to make it all a little bit safer. So, it looks like if you want to respond, I think we have a small enough group that we're willing to kind of continue a little dialogue before we move forward or on. So
my final comment is that, I appreciate anything that's been done to make the spot safer and our street safer, because since I've lived here, all hours of the day, night, doesn't matter, people speed up and down Clark. My biggest point was that to slow people down, if that's the intention, temporary or permanent speed bumps for me slows me down on any street that has them, and that should be the focus. I feel like it's just taking a long time to get to that point rather than, so these things are fine, but for me to slow people down, that's the solution that I would think would work best if that's the main problem, which it is. So that's all I have to add.
I guess I'd just like to add, I think there's, going back again to the commercial feel of these things, I want to, no one specifically talked about whether or not these lights are going to be flashing in people's windows, but they can be, you can put like blinders, shutters on them, I think, to limit how wide they go. And there'll be a little bit of a process once they're installed to adjust that. So, it's not going to just be installed and then that's it. So, let us know if these are blinding into your bedroom windows at night and causing disturbances and things like that. Because we definitely don't want this to be more of a nuisance for the neighbors than not having it. I think that there's a lot of literature out there, planning studies and things on speed bumps. I've not done a lot, but I've heard, in order for a length of road to actually be slowed down significantly, you need to have speed bumps very regularly placed, because people will, most people, yourselves, will slow down for a speed bump and keep going slow. But there are a number of drivers who will, slam on the brakes right before they get to the speed bump, and then as soon as they get over the speed bump, they accelerate back up to 45. So, you see this in neighborhoods where there's one or two speed bumps and it doesn't actually end up slowing down the traffic. So we want to be careful that any speed bumps that get installed actually, in the future, as we're continue to explore this, that anything that's installed actually does what it intends and doesn't just create more nuisance. Like Jeff said, and City Councilor said, this is good to hear, and the Public Safety Committee's DPW is going to keep looking into this and keep trying to resolve the speed issue.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for coming out. I think it's great. I mean, I know this is hard because we're not solving all the problems that do exist there, but it is an attempt to try to do something. And so I just want to thank everyone, because there's been a lot of feedback. We use social media, and it's a little, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but a lot of people acknowledged like the attempt, and hopefully for pedestrians this is an improvement. And then there were some letters too. So I appreciate the input, and I appreciate kind of having the dialogue. So I think that's meaningful. I guess I don't really know how to end this, Jamie, but if we're successful in continuing to move forward, the expectation that we're trying to meet is to have these installed before June 30th. And so that's kind of our target. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of things that have to come together to make that happen, but this was an important step in that process. So Jamie, I don't know, what else would we need to do at this point to finish off, I guess, the hearing process?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that everyone who's here has had an opportunity to speak, feels like we've addressed your concerns or comments. If there's any additional things that people want to say, I want to give a brief pause to let people speak up. If things come up after the meeting, feel free to email us. Our contact information is on the website, on the planning department page, easthamptonma.gov/planning. And again, I just want to echo what Jeff said. Thank you all for coming out this afternoon and showing support, and want to urge you to keep coming out to these types of meetings, coming to the City Council's Public Safety Committee, keep sending comments to DPW about how these interventions work or don't work, or send the comments to us, and we'll get them to the appropriate people. This is the start and not the final word. So, any more comments, questions? All right. Chris, I saw you on mute. Did you?
Yeah. So I guess I don't think anyone's really spoke about what the fog lines do or what they are, but my understanding is they're white lines on the side of the road. Those are the fog lines, right? And so that would give the road an appearance of being narrower and slow people down. Is that correct? Am I right on that?
Yeah, and I think either Greg or Diane can talk more about how that process works.
Yeah, it's a visual. It's a visual way to slow people down. It may or may not, but it's kind of like curbing. Curbing's a little bit more of a jump out to you because it's vertical, but fog lines are a way of traffic calming. Yes.
And I'll also just add that it's my understanding that parking is allowed on Clark Street, and any intervention that causes the street to be narrower or causes people to go slower to go around a parked car is going to slow down traffic on that street. So if people want to use their cars to try to slow down some traffic, that might be an option as well. It's not a speed bump, and it's not. I don't know.
Yeah, Chris has a couple of old ones we can put out there, which is great.
Don't tempt me.
If there's no more comments, we'll close the public hearing. And just want to thank you again for coming out tonight.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.